Hey everybody, good to be back. Glad to see you're back. Hope you guys have been liking and subscribing on these videos because I've been getting more consistent about turning this content out. So you gotta feed me with those likes and subscribes. Keep me going. So today I am going to do a video that I've kind of sat on doing for quite a while. Part because I just needed to get sample material together and it's taken a while. And this lens is not exactly a lens that pops to the top of everyone's list. It's a very unique specialty lens. It is the Sigma 120 to 300 2.8 zoom. Yeah, that's right. It's 2.8 at the 300 end. It's a constant aperture. So this is a pretty special, unique, and amazing lens. It's not cheap. It's not for everyone, but if you were considering possibly, say, the Canon 300 2.8 or your camera brand 300 2.8, a modern autofocus lens, guess what? This lens is the same price or pretty close to it, within a few $100s, that sort of range. And it's a much more versatile lens because, well, you've got that 120 part as well, and you've got all the focal lengths in between. It's also autofocus and it's image stabilized. Now, what about optically? I mean, what's the trade-off here? Well, I've actually shot this against the same Canon 300 280 a couple of years ago, and, optically, good luck telling these apart. I mean, if you want a pixel peep, under certain circumstances, one lens might look a smidge better than the other, but by and large, these lenses, for all practical purposes, are close enough that you're never going to tell the difference between the two of them apart. This is a big lens. The front lens filter is 105 millimeter. Now, if you want to put a protector on there, or if your camera doesn't have internal ND, 4x4 matte box might start to look pretty interesting. Now, I've kept my rigging on this bare because I really just wanted to show the lens. Obviously, you could set up a regular matte box on the front, and you could set up motors on this. Now, these gears, which are not factory, were made by followfocusgears.com. That's Sean over there, giving him a shout out. They are 3D printed, but they work and fit fine. You're not going to wear them out. So I'd probably recommend that you put gears on this lens because they're obviously going to make your life better. You can certainly rig a regular follow focus on here, or you're probably going to actually prefer to put motors on here because at 300 millimeter, or even at 150 or 100, handling this lens is very tricky and precise. So the first thing that you really have to start with is a good tripod head. Don't even think about putting some Manfrotto 500 series head under here. Even the Nitrotech heads are not going to cut it with this. And let's just say we know that from experience. This Vinton 11 is probably a little bit on the light side to handle this, but I can pretty much do what I want. It's kind of pushing me towards really upgrading to a proper O'Connor head and being done with it. That said, once you've got a solid tripod head and of course legs, you want double tube solid legs, 100 millimeter ball minimum. You cannot really successfully work this lens with any sort of moving subjects without that. Next is lens support, and I've got 15 millimeter rods on here. You could upgrade to 19, but let's talk about one or two unique things here. This is a Berkey System base plate, and I had them make me a custom riser. It's a 19 millimeter, it's 3/4 inch riser between the top and that. And the reason I did that is my follow focus, my matte box, they were all kind of sized for 19 mil base setup, and so I found everything was too low, things didn't clear right, and once I added this riser, then everything kind of fell into place. If you own, say, one of the older Red cameras that has a very high lens mount, then you might not need to think about that. So of course, stainless steel here. Aluminum rods, again, are not going to cut it. This is a really heavy lens. So you have to get yourself a lens support, and you need to have a decent one here. Unfortunately, this lens doesn't have any sort of 1/4 or 3/8 on the bottom. It does have a foot that comes with it, and that has the usual quarter on the bottom, but it really doesn't quite clear in here very well, and I think maybe if things were exactly perfect, you could put a flat 15 mil plate adapter, like for putting a battery plate or something on there, just one of those flat adapters. You might be able to wedge or shim it together or make some kind of custom piece for it, but for me, it just wasn't worth it. Instead, I just went with the tilt-a-lens support here. Ideally, you might want something that goes around the top to secure this, but in practice, I haven't had a problem doing that. The lens, unfortunately, is only EF and a couple of other still camera mounts. There is no PL version of this, and that's really kind of disappointing. In fact, I haven't even seen a third party come along and do a PL adaptation of this. The focus range on this is about, I don't know, 90 or 120 degrees. It's not focused by wire because even with everything powered off, I'm actually turning this so there is a mechanical clutch in here. If you rotate this around hard, you can hear it tap and release. So it's kind of an interesting setup. It works okay. So obviously, if you're going to put a motor on here, you have to manually set your points on this. Once we're past the basic rigging and setup on this, and you can't be stingy with setting this up properly, let's talk about what it's like to shoot with. It's a pretty amazing lens, to say the least. The autofocus actually does work well. I've used it on Canon camera bodies, and I've also used it on Fuji for shooting stills, and came away with some absolutely phenomenal shots with it. Another accessory that you probably want to buy with this lens if you don't have it is the Sigma USB access programmer. It's like a lens cap that goes on the back with a USB port that allows an app on the computer to talk to the lens. And there's been a bunch of firmware updates, maybe every 6 to 12 months. There's been some firmware update, but it also allows you to customize the functions of these switches on the side so you can set them up the way you want. The other incredibly important thing that you get to do, hopefully just once, is the micro focus adjustment. Well, what's that? The micro focus adjustment is basically a way of programming the firmware of the lens to say, even though the body told you it's in focus, just go a little bit further out or a little bit closer in. And then you'll get absolutely critical focus with this. I know a lot of Canon cameras do this. One would think in this day and age that that's not absolutely necessary, but a couple of years ago, I went through the process. It was tedious and horrible and took a couple hours. And basically what it entails is set up a focus chart, set it up at like 5, 10, 20, and infinity, and take shots. Bring them into the computer and make a decision. Is it critically sharp? Is it a little front or back focused? And then in the software for the lens, make an adjustment, move it a couple points one way or the other, shoot the tests again. It's a back and forth process until you figure you've gotten to the point of where you're getting the best focus. And so far, so good. I haven't had to repeat that. So I guess the micro focus adjustments that I put into here are good for the life of the lens. It's a very interesting, very versatile lens. And with that said, let's just take a look at what it can do. That's it, folks. Thanks for having a watch, and we'll see you soon. Like, subscribe, you know the deal, and thanks.